The rest of Europe may not be at war, but is it ready for the sacrifices of a wartime economy? The Kremlin shutting the tap on Bulgaria and Poland could be just a prelude to a brutally swift transition away from Russian oil and gas. Deals will be dropped, money will be lost. Will citizens revolt when they receive their next jaw-dropping energy bill? Or do they agree that the invasion of Ukraine once and for all ended that argument with those who espouse doing deals with Vladimir Putin as a means of encouraging peace through trade? Even Germany is changing course. More broadly, at what point does staring down a threat matter more than making money? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Vladimir Putin has decided to start shutting the tap. With us, economist Anna Credi, professor at the University of Paris's Dauphine Center for Geopolitics, Energy and Raw Materials. Welcome back to the show.
Good evening.
Welcome as well to Thierry Brosse, professor at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po. You're the co-author of The Geopolitics of Russian Gas, published in French, soon in English?
No, just in French.
Just in French. Okay.
Published others in English.
All right. From Berlin, political scientist Jens Fischer, who's also a member of the conservative CDU party. Welcome to the show.
Good evening from Berlin.
And from Brussels, France 24 correspondent Dave Keating, who will be reveling us with tales of, quote, blackmail. Thank you for joining us as well. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, after the news cycle of the past days, it's been dominated by those growing arms exports by the West to Ukraine. Now you could call this the Kremlin's response. Sinead McCausland has more.
An attempt by the Kremlin to blackmail the European Union. Those were the words used by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Wednesday, as she described Russia's decision to cut off gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria.
Gazprom's announcement that it is unilaterally stopping gas deliveries to certain EU member states is another provocation from the Kremlin. Our response will be immediate, united, and coordinated. We will ensure that Gazprom's decision has the least possible impact on European consumers.
The Kremlin on Wednesday denied that Moscow had used natural gas supplies as an instrument for blackmail. Later on Wednesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin vowed to counter attempts to isolate Russia. He said the country had so far withstood Western sanctions.
Our banking system, national currency, transportation, trade, the economy as a whole have withstood and did not disintegrate, no. On the contrary, they now have good enough resources to develop, to launch new projects in industry, infrastructure, the development of the potential of all of our regions.
Polish President Andrzej Duda was in Prague on Wednesday. He vowed that legal action would be taken against Gazprom for breach of contract. Poland announced on Tuesday that it was imposing sanctions against 50 Russian oligarchs and companies. The country relies on Gazprom for about 50% of its consumption, while 90% of Bulgaria's gas comes from the Russian giant. Both countries have tried to dispel worry, pointing to supplies from other European countries and sufficient storage of gas. There are concerns that Gazprom could shut off supplies to other countries, potentially causing Europe economic pain. Russia provides 40% of Europe's gas and 25% of its oil, at a cost of $850 million a day.
Dave Keating, how prepared was the European Union for this moment?
Well, President von der Leyen was trying to convince us all that the EU is very prepared for this. She highlighted the fact that new interconnections have been built between EU countries over the past decade. That indeed has been a big focus, connecting the EU's splintered energy market. And she said that because of those interconnectors that have been built and that new gas infrastructure, Poland and Bulgaria will be able to get gas from their neighbors. She also noted that since Russia started building up troops outside Ukraine late last year, and we knew this was a possibility, countries have been storing extra gas. So there is gas to be had there. The problem is that's a short-term solution. What happens in the long term? And what happens if Putin shuts off the taps to Poland and Bulgaria's neighbors as well? It was unclear from her explanations today. She kind of talked in the short term and the long term. Short term, getting gas from neighbors. Long term, we need to invest in renewables, find other suppliers. This Repower EU strategy that she came out with that envisions a new energy future for the EU. What about the medium term? Before those renewables and other energy suppliers become available, but after those energy storage sites have been exhausted. That we didn't hear so much about.
All right, but let's comb through that. Let's first talk about, like you say, the short term. Poland insists it's been preparing. It says it's got 76% capacity at its storage facilities. For Bulgaria, it's perhaps more precarious. Russia's Gazprom supplies 90% of its needs via Turkey. You can see it on this map here. Anna Kreti, is Bulgaria ready? And if the tap is shut for more East European nations, are they ready?
Preparedness should be there in a couple of months. Whether there is a sufficient solidarity across European countries in order to redirect the gas to Bulgaria, this is something that we have basically never tried. So it is true that even before this shock, one of the objectives of the common market, the gas market, was to ensure the possibility of counterflows, that is from one country to the other, bypassing the major flows of importing gas from
the one
Russia.
everyone's talking about is going from Germany to Poland.
Yes, and this it is true that the deliveries through Yamal have been quite low during the last 6 months. So it is not a shock. There was some signal that was already given by Russia to say, well, the Yamal pipeline is not going to work all the way down until 2022, which is also a date at which Poland is going to end some specific contracts. And both Poland and Bulgaria, they had announced that they didn't want to renew those contracts. So I would say that it's a precipitation. It's something that was in the air, but is now coming at really is not a threat, is a reality.
Jens Fischer, again, it's that question that Dave Keating posed earlier. What if it's more than just Poland and Bulgaria? I imagine it's not been a great day where you are, what with growth figures for Germany for being revised downwards this Wednesday.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think anybody has the answer to this question at the moment. Our energy minister, economics minister, Robert Habeck, is flying around the world, talking to states, trying to shore up other resources. But the truth is that decades of politics that were friendly towards Russia, that counted on Russia being a reliable partner, have now been thrown on the heap of history, and we honestly don't know what's going to come next. For now, it's a threat against Germany that the supply to Poland and Bulgaria has been shut off. But we shall see if this comes to pass. If we are another unfriendly nation, there certainly is a lot of diplomatic and political debate in this country at the moment going on to see what are the outcomes, what are the risks Germany should take, how should Germany position itself in this very complex scenario that on the first hand is very simple, and should be very simple, but looking at the responsibilities and the dependencies, it's not that simple to take as a decision for the government.
Thierry Brosse, I don't know if you're a betting man, but would you bet that Russia would cut the tap on Germany?
They will cut a tap on other countries, that's for sure, because we've seen a gradation since back last year when they started to not sell extra spot volumes, when last year they decided not to refill storage in Germany. So there is going to be something happening next. Is this going to be Germany or something else? I don't know, but there will be another country. And I think what you have to understand is so far they've cut 8% of the Russian flow. This is fully manageable in Europe, but what is not manageable if they cut 100%. So if they cut Germany, that starts to be the systemic risk.
And just to fact check what we heard Vladimir Putin say in that report, saying we've withstood the sanctions, the banking system is holding up fine, the ruble is holding up fine. Is that true?
Well, I'm not in Russia, but I think he is trying to deliver a speech to his opinion. On our side, I think sanctions are hitting Russia, and I think we need to not blink, and we need to increase our pressure on Russia. We need to be united against this, and we need to be prepared to have more cuts coming.
By the way, if we're talking about oil and gas crunches and an oil crunch, we could take you to Saint-Étienne in the center of France. There, chef Marc Lecroiset is feeling the pinch, what with Russia and Ukraine combining for 80% of the world's sunflower oil production.
In the space of a few months, the price of oil has more than doubled. Before, I was getting it for around €1.40, €1.50, and now it's up to almost €3 or €3.50. It depends when you find some.
Dave Keating, you're in the land of pommes frites, chips. What do they make them with but sunflower oil? It's this feeling that it's all commodities that are going through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, this is very, very worrying because we have all of these prices going up all at the same time. You have kind of more generalized inflation that started with the pandemic recovery and, of course, was not helped by the Ukraine war. Then we have specifically commodity prices rising and energy prices rising. So this is a huge triple whammy for consumers. They're seeing those prices higher at the grocery store, they're seeing it higher at the pump, and on these, particularly on these specific items that relate to food sources, commodity sources that have heavily come from Ukraine, that the agriculture sector relies on, we're starting to see these specific shortages in these specific areas. Now, here in Brussels, EU politicians have been talking about this quite a lot. We've had quite a lot of emergency meetings with agriculture ministers, energy ministers, trying to get a handle on this situation. But it is a bit out of control at the moment, and it's very, very hard to predict these types of supply chain issues. There's no easy political solution, that's for sure. There's no easy business solution. And the messaging I'm hearing is increasingly from politicians that consumers are just going to have to weather down for this. This isn't going to get any better in the short term. And when it comes to pommes frites here in Brussels, I'm afraid we may be looking at a shortage, which would make a lot of Belgian people very sad.
And French people too. You heard, Dave, a moment ago, Thierry Brosse predicting that there's going to be more countries that will see their natural gas cut. If it's all about how much people can stomach, how much citizens can stomach when it comes to, again, what might resemble a wartime economy with rationing in some sectors, are people ready for it?
I think, when we look at our lifestyles in the West, we're probably not ready for it. I mean, we've never lived through anything like this. It's really struck me that when you see these interviews with the average person on the street in Russia, what's the first thing that they all say? We've been through hard times before. They certainly went through extreme hard times in the 1990s. We're ready for it, they say. Are we ready for it in the West? I think that's the big question. We have, certainly someone my age, I've grown up in a lifetime of really nothing but of general comforts and never lived through anything like this. And so I think, the pause that politicians have is in the first weeks of the Ukraine war, when we could see these horrifying images, hear these horrifying stories, you might get the population saying, yeah, we're willing to do whatever it takes to help Ukraine. As the war drags on, as we are being told it will people's resolve loosen? Will they forget why the prices are so high? Will they forget why they have to be rationing energy, why they can't have French fries when they want to? And will they start to blame their domestic political leaders? That is, of course, what politicians are worried about and the tightrope that they're going to have to walk for a while.
Anna Credi, we're now into the third month of this conflict. When you look, for instance, at your native Italy, we saw even the far-right leader at the start of the war going to Ukraine, trying to portray himself as somebody who's on the Ukrainian side and not the Russian side. Now, as those price hikes that Dave is describing are kicking in, is the resolve still there?
I don't think that this was a really a position that has been shared by the Italian population. What the Italian citizen as well as the French or the Belgian see is the increase of the prices and also the intervention of the government, knowing that if there are some measures slightly different from the ones that there are actually operational in France, but still on the same style in terms of trying to reduce the price increase for and consumers, well, those measures cannot be forever. And at some point, someone has to pay. So the idea is that people complain about the consequences of the war, but this leaves even less room to politicians in terms of.
Do they say to you, yeah, this is a pain, these price hikes, but how can Russia invade Ukraine? Or they just look at their pocketbook?
No. I think that they try to say that it is something they cannot control, in the sense that they cannot accept somehow to protect Italian consumers because, they cannot stop the war. They say, well, this is a consequence that we have to accept, but I think that it takes longer than what we should do in terms of reaction.
It's going to be a long process, Thierry Brosse. And again, we're coming out of a presidential election, heading into legislative elections here in France. Do you feel that the French are understanding as we head towards the summer months and when they see the price at the pump?
No, I think the risk in Europe, in France and Italy, is that citizens were pushing authorities to be tough on Putin vis-à-vis Ukraine, because we cannot accept to have those pictures. But once the consequences, i.e. those high prices, not only in energy but in food, are going to feed in, you may find some people coming back and waking up and saying, well, this is a consequence that I was not forecasting, and so therefore we may have a revival of the Gilets jaunes. And this is where there is a huge political risk, because in this case, are we going to turn back to Vladimir Putin and ask him, can we get more of your oil or your gas? And so therefore we must really explain to our population that this is going to be a long process and a difficult process.
And is it the same as Anna was describing in Italy, that the French, for now, are still siding firmly with Ukraine?
Yes, I think the French for now are still siding with Ukraine. Once they will see that there is no way we can stop these increases in oil, in gas and in food, they may wake up and decide to view it differently. But this is where we have, and policymakers have, really to educate people and tell them that this is, as you stated, a war economy. We are in a war economy. It's not something that we've lived in our lifetime. And so therefore, there may even be some rationing at the end. IEA was saying, do not drive your car on Sundays, something we never experienced.
Yeah, Germany, again, which is the biggest importer in Europe of Russian natural gas. It's got its heavy industry, export-driven economy, definitely spooked by the prospect of losing half of its supplies. France 24 spoke to one entrepreneur who needs that natural gas to power his ceramics plant in the Brandenburg region near Berlin.
It's possible, and I will add that I could completely understand that we impose sanctions on gas and therefore would no longer be able to get supplies. But it would be a huge risk for us, because if we have to ration the gas we have left, it's obviously not going to be set aside for the production of ceramic tiles.
Now, Jens Fischer, that interview was conducted a few weeks back. We've seen this just this week, Germany announcing it's sending more arms to Ukraine. Do you think that entrepreneur would be saying the same thing today?
I think yes, for the moment, because for now things are relatively calm. This could change very quickly if the gas embargo starts, then or rationing would have to be done. But for now, it's a few goods that are missing in the supermarkets. It's rising prices everywhere at the pump, but also obviously for other energy resources. But the overall mood in the population, at least from what I can see and from what I can judge, is very calm. There have been a few pro-Russian demonstrations, specifically in Berlin. They made the headlines, so probably a lot of people have seen them. But overall, the sympathy and the solidarity with Ukrainians and with Ukraine is overwhelming. You can see them standing in front of the town halls waiting for their asylum or refugee procedures. And people are helping, people are sharing in. How this will develop, I mean, for the summer, we are probably good and we have enough supplies of gas as well. The next winter is going to be when it bites and also when the war drags on. And I think that will be a completely different scenario and question. Hopefully we have some solutions by then.
It's making ripples, though, in German politics. The former chancellor is growing closer now to being expelled from the ruling Social Democratic Party since the now 78-year-old Gerhard Schroeder's weekend interview in the New York Times, where he defended his board position at Gazprom and the Nord Stream pipeline. What if Russia turns off the tap, he's asked. It won't happen, says Schroeder in that interview. But if it did, then I would resign. Well, that would be too late for the current leader of the SPD. Let's take a listen to Saskia Esken.
Gerhard Schroeder has been acting as a businessman for many years now, and we should stop seeing him as an elder statesman or as a former chancellor. He earns his money working for Russian state-owned companies. And if you ask specifically, his defense of Vladimir Putin's war crimes accusations has been absurd.
Jens Fischer, your reaction?
Mr. Schroeder, it's a bizarre piece that he's been giving for years now. To be honest, I don't think the SPD is to blame as much, so the Social Democratic Party. This has been a joint effort by all parties to have good business relationships with Russia. I think Mr. Schroeder is just a particularly bizarre example which direction this can take. Whether or not he's going to be thrown out of the party, I don't think it matters at all. Also, what his positions are, it's what the German policy is going to be. And for that, our chancellor, the new chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has been relatively quiet so far. I understand that he's taking a cautious approach, not to rouse the ruffles too much. But we will need to get some decisions at some point, and I don't think we can stay in this in between forever, in which we give some aid, but not all aid, and we have to be very careful about everything. We have to take a stand, as has just been said. And so I think Schroeder is a red herring that we shouldn't follow too much. It's much more about German politics today. And hopefully the Social Democrats are going to emancipate themselves and are going to step away from this fascination with Russia to get to a new, better European understanding of this crisis.
And of course, if you prosecute with hindsight being 2020, Germany's energy policy over the last 20 years, Schroeder's controversies kind of let Angela Merkel off the hook. After all, the Nord Stream pipeline comes out in her home constituency.
I don't think that she has been ditching responsibility. It's a gamble that I think pretty much everybody in Germany agrees has gone completely the wrong way. The feeling was always that Russia was a trustworthy partner, and let me remind you, even during the Cold War, energy supplies and all that gas and oil business has been untainted by the very high political tensions. So the idea that this new regime, this more totalitarian, I dare to say almost fascist regime, is taking are unprecedented since the Second World War. And let's not forget that Russia helped to liberate Germany, then set up its own dictatorship. But this is also a historical memory in Germany that people feel that Russia has been on the good side of history. This is changing very much right now, as you could hear from that entrepreneur you quoted earlier. But how this will develop in society, specifically in the East, is yet to be seen.
Thierry Bros, it's confession time. Did you agree with the likes of Nicolas Sarkozy when he was selling, as French president, ships to the Russians that, we can do business with Russia, we can bring Russia into the fold? Or did you see all of this coming?
No, I agreed on the ships. This is outside my domain of expertise, but I agreed with Nord Stream 1. So I have to say that France, and when I was in charge of this, I was in favor of Nord Stream 1 because this was rerouting and providing more gas. But I was, for many, many years, against Nord Stream 2 because I think, and this was always the view of the French, I mean, diversification of supply and diversification of supply on the EU level is at least 3 different suppliers. And the way you could do the mass of 3 different suppliers is one have 95% and the two other has 5%, which some countries have. But the idea in France was maximum 33% each. And so we shouldn't have been more dependent than 33% of Russian gas.
So what was it? What was the other two? It was like Norway, Algeria?
We were dependent on the Netherlands, on Norway, on Algeria, on Russia. And Italy or France has always never been over-dependent on one country. So I was against Nord Stream 2. And again, we could have listened to the Polish because, interestingly enough, for the last 10 years, the Polish have had a very, very strong energy policy that was overlooked in Brussels. They were the ones saying, as Anna Kreti stated, we are going to get rid of Russian gas by December 2022. But not only we are going to do it, but how are we going to do it? We are building a regas. We are building interconnection with public money, with European public money. And we are building also a pipe that is going to be effective in the coming months between Norway and Poland to bring Norwegian gas in Poland. So the Polish have a very good track record in energy policy. The Spanish, if you go to the Spanish, also have understood the risk of being over-dependent. Germany, unfortunately, didn't, and we were a few to mention it many years ago, but that's my take.
Dave Keating, we've spoken a lot on this program over the past months and how much Europe has had to accelerate pooling its efforts in things like purchasing vaccines, but also of late when it comes to energy. When you hear Thierry Brosse describe the energy mix, how close are we to that mutualization that can insulate the EU if Russia decided from one day to the next to completely shut the tap?
I mean, I think we're getting there, but it's going to take some time, right? I mean, this Repower EU plan, it's really looking so far into the future. It's placing a lot of the emphasis on decarbonization, but also obviously diversification. But if you look at the diversification routes for gas in particular, the problem is gas right now mostly comes to the EU through pipelines. If you want to get it from somewhere other than Russia and you want to get it quickly, it has to come by boat. And that means it has to be liquefied, something called liquefied natural gas. That needs facilities both to turn the gas into a liquid and to turn the liquid back into gas when it arrives. And European countries haven't built many of these LNG receipt terminals. And actually, Spain has been really in advance on this. There's lots of them in Spain. Germany hadn't built one, not a single one in all this time. And Spain has, I think, 5 or 6. The problem is Spain isn't connected to the rest of the EU with gas pipelines. So all of this LNG can come into Spain and then it has nowhere to go. And where you really need it right now, Germany, they haven't built any. So there's some countries that have been more forward thinking on this. We could have used, I think, a little bit more EU muscle in the energy department. I could name some previous energy commissioners that were German that were not very helpful on this. But you know, that's hindsight. Looking forward, this proposal, this strategy that the Commission just came out with is quite ambitious, but the problem is this stuff takes a lot of time, especially building these terminals and pipelines. I mean, that's a 5-year project for an LNG terminal.
Jens Fischer?
And to get it hooked up, that's a long time.
Sorry, to respond to this, yeah, we have no LNG terminals, it's true. I don't think it's that simple. It's not just the commissioners, right? I mean, this gas that would be on the ships is a lot more expensive than the cheap gas through the pipeline. And so the business case has never been as clear. I fully agree that this would have been a good idea in hindsight, but for the time being, it looked like a safe option to build these. And I think the time frame has always been around 10 to 20 years. Now stepping it up, but as we just heard, it's still 5 years until such a terminal can be built, we don't have that many options on the coast where we could reasonably build these terminals. So that's 2 or 3 options that are being explored right now. But we're still in planning stage. So it's not like these could be start to build. It's still a financing issue. And now unbelievable resources are being liberated to change what we have done so far and to get to different energy resources. It's just not going to happen overnight. And it's a fact we have to deal with. And I said in the beginning, no real solution at the moment.
Not going to happen overnight. Of course, on this side of the Rhine, they regularly say to the Germans, there is a solution, which is keep those nuclear power plants running. What are the chances of that happening?
My understanding is that those that have been turned off, you would have to completely restart the process, which is unreasonable and wouldn't happen. The Energy Ministry is exploring options to keep those that are still operational. It's 3, I think, 3 power plants that are still operational, to keep them online for longer than had been planned. But let me remind you, a lot of this has to do with the debate around climate change, around resources. I don't want to get into this right now because it would completely take away this broadcast from what we want to talk about. But yes, there have been plans in the background. All of them are now in tumbles, and we will have to resort to emergency measures for the moment and then see how to get a plan out of this. Whether or not to reinvest in nuclear energy, it's a big debate right now. I don't see it coming for numerous reasons, but would have been a good idea 5 years ago to see this coming and then maybe to do something about it.
Anna Kreti?
I mean, all those questions on investment in infrastructure is difficult today, and we all end up by saying we should have done something before. The point is that now we are losing time. So even in these 3 months, what is the European Commission discussing? I think that we need more action. And
but we've seen, for instance, the German ministers go to the Middle East and court
other countries,
Qatar,
yes, well, they will meet in June. The OPEC countries are going to
in the old days, Anna, it was easy. You would just get the president of the United States to call up the king of Saudi Arabia, and you'd have more oil and more gas.
Now they have to understand if this is doable on their side and at which price they want to offer additional gas and oil to the European countries. Just to add something, for instance, in Italy, the nuclear option, which is, as we know, inexistent, will remain as such. So there's a huge opposition in coming up again with the renaissance of nuclear. So we have to take for granted what we have and perhaps accelerate, not saying we are going to build something new. I don't want, that the money from the Green Deal is going to end up by financing a new gas infrastructure. We have to do the transition. So we start managing also the demand. I do not hear such a huge force in the message from the European Union.
The question that's come up on the campaign trail from the far right and the far left here in France during the presidential race and probably during the race coming up for the legislative elections in June, which is the building of all these LNG terminals, and it's basically a win for the United States, not for the Europe. What do you say to that?
Well, the build in France was done before the US shale gas revolution, and I would say to our German colleague that yes, LNG is more costly, but it is the premium that you have to pay for security of supply. So we did overinvest in France in this, knowing that the cost will be higher, but at the end of the day, we need this LNG right now. So is this a win for the US? It's a win for any kind of country that is able to do this. I think it could be also a win for Norway, because we should go into Norway and ask Norway to produce more gas. What Russia has cut today...
They say their reserves are starting to dwindle, the Norwegians.
Well, they say this, but they didn't do much investment because the narrative was we are going to get out of gas soon. The 12 BCM that Russia has cut today per year to Poland and Bulgaria, it's 10% extra from Norway. I think this is doable. And again, you've seen the Italian Prime Minister touring Africa to get extra gas. And he has been quite successful in doing this. So it's not only the US. I think the win as you rightly said, is perhaps for gas that is, I would call fungible, which is the LNG. So it is the end of pipe gas, because pipe gas is too risky. So it is a new world. It's going to be more costly, but it is a win for the US, it is a win for Qatar, it is a win for Australia.
And Thierry Brosse, even if Russia had not invaded Ukraine, is it simply the fact that maybe we've reached finally that point that had been predicted for decades of peak oil, where there's starting to be less and less oil and gas, and that we should have been preparing for that more?
No, I disagree with this, because I think we should look for peak demand, not peak production. Peak production, we are far away. We have more oil and gas and coal needed on planet Earth to warm it up to 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees. So it's not the peak oil issue, because engineers will be smart enough to find new ways, the shale gas revolution as we've seen, or the shale oil revolution. I think, as Anna stated, we need to be strong in managing demand, in trying to move away to this peak oil and gas demand, this peak coal demand, which we haven't heard from the Commission.
We haven't heard from it, but also, Dave Keating, there's the pressure from those who don't want the planet to overheat.
I mean, that's for sure. And that's kind of the decision that the EU has to make right now, because as I was saying, these LNG investments are a lot of money and a lot of time. And there have been actually a couple studies that have come out over the past 2 months showing that it would be cheaper and faster to invest in renewables and energy efficiency. You would get the result quicker. You would save the same amount of Russian imported gas. It would deliver in 2 years, let's say, instead of 5 years, like a new LNG terminal, particularly those efficiency measures. I mean, one example would be heat pumps. So if you started replacing everybody's gas boilers with heat pumps that work by circulating warm air through electricity, it's something like 24 BCM per year, I think. It's a very, very large amount you could save really fast, because you would just be swapping everybody's boiler. It doesn't require these huge projects to be building giant terminals and pipelines. So things like that could actually deliver a result faster. The problem is it's maybe not as sexy as the announcement of a new investment in an LNG terminal, a new pipeline, these new deals being struck with Middle Eastern countries. Heat pumps are kind of technical and not so sexy, and it's a lot of little things happening all at once, right? But that's the result that could actually be much, much more effective and faster.
Anna Kreti, you agree?
Totally agree, but this element of managing what it can be done has been absent, and this jeopardizes also the reactions from the different countries that are already doing this kind of transition with the different commitments. But I mean, this has been an opportunity lost in order to, again, underline the need of this. It is not an investment, it's a disinvestment, it's going back. And we have seen also the difficulties in during the French campaign. No one has said a word on that.
What about things like turning the thermostat down? They don't like to talk about it?
The thermostat down, the speed of the using cars.
The speed limit's gone, after going down to 80 kilometers an hour on roads, now gone back up.
Yes, we are in the world of contradiction. That's the major problem. So we have to be coherent.
All right. Jens Fischer, I know that, you know, the platform of the government where you are, a coalition government, includes things like putting solar panels on roofs. How do people feel about wearing an extra sweater in the house instead?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's been talking about freezing for Ukraine despite a cold February. But I think also everybody agrees that's not an actual solution to the problem. Sure, we can turn down the heating a few degrees, but it's not going to solve the overall issue. Let me quickly remind you of, like, Germany, since the fall of the wall, has been in this idea of a peace dividend, that now everybody around us is friendly neighbors and we don't have to care about such things as much anymore, about armament, about energy supplies, and so on. And people are waking up to a completely different reality. In a sense, I would say we are lucky to have this government that has the Green Party in it, that has the Social Democrats in it, Because imagine a conservative government with a leftist opposition that would now be shouting from the rooftops about all the things that are going wrong. So in a sense, we're in a lucky position, and we can see specifically the Greens have changed moods very quickly, have gone into war mode, are now supporting armament, are now supporting, like you said, our energy minister going around and making deals with Saudi Arabia and Oman and other countries to secure energy supplies. That's unheard of. That's a proper change of mood. And I think it's for the better at the moment. There is a sense of realism. A lot of people are taking this very seriously. So I can see big change coming about very quickly that would have been unthinkable half a year ago because of the political constellation, because of the political culture. And I'm relatively optimistic that we're going to handle this, specifically now given half a year of relative quiet because it will be warm outside. That helps a lot in fixing a couple of these things.
Yeah, and the threat in any case is real. It's real, obviously, for the Ukrainians. They've been invaded, and it's real for Russia's neighbors that are inside of the European Union and NATO. Just this Wednesday, in a speech before lawmakers in his hometown of St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin boasting that he's holding up well under sanctions and turning his sights on the West, just as it's ratcheting up its supply of weapons and intelligence to Ukraine.
If someone intervenes in events from the outside, this will create strategic threats that are unacceptable for us. They should know that our response to counterstrikes will be immediate and quick.
Jens Fischer, people in Germany, are they shrugging off these kinds of statements? Or is this, again, an extra worry?
It's absolutely an extra worry. It's predictable unpredictability what the Russian government is doing. And bringing out the nuclear threat once in a while is obviously very effective. I will say this, but this is not the shared position in the population, I think. If the Russians want to nuke us, not much we can do about it. Mutual assured destruction makes sure that they will be nuked as well, but if the government is crazy enough to push the button, we'll see. If we go to more tactical weapons, and we could see tactical nuclear weapons deployed in Ukraine, very hard to predict what the world would say to this. But in Germany, this is heard feverishly, and people are debating about this day and night. What is defensive? How far can we go? What is the support that we can give to the Ukrainians? And you can see the line of our government being very cautious. I said before that the chancellor is being perceived by many people as too quiet and that he should be speaking out and should be more open in communication. But on the other hand, if the end of the world is on the line, well, there's probably a good idea to take pause and be careful what you say, when you say it, and rather engage in quiet diplomacy. So not even I'm very unhappy with the state at the moment. I would like to see progress in Ukraine, but it's difficult to see how that happens with the Russian government that is as crazy at behaving as crazily as this one.
Thierry Brosse, is the Russian government behaving crazily?
Vladimir Putin is behaving in an unexpected manner. I mean, we don't know who's going to be the next one to be cut off. We don't know if he's going to use the nuclear weapon. And so we have to be prepared. And this is why I follow what Anna was saying. I mean, we need to make sure that we are getting out of this Russian gas as fast as possible and to be ready for the next step where there will be more different gas. You're saying more LNG, but I think later this LNG can be rerouted to China if needed, and more renewable, and as a French, I will add more nuke.
And Dave Keating, again, it's this two-track, right? On the one hand, we're talking sanctions, and on the other hand, we're talking about weapons and intelligence being supplied to Ukraine. From Brussels right now, the events of this week and the cutting of the gas, is that going to ratchet up that support for Ukraine?
Well, I think that's the big question. We're waiting for this sixth package of sanctions, which is supposed to contain an embargo on Russian oil. We thought we were going to get a proposal yesterday from the European Commission for EU ambassadors to discuss today. It didn't come. It's the end of the day today. It's still not here. I don't know where it is. I don't know what the holdup is. Nobody seems to know. I've been asking all day. So this news from yesterday, I mean, maybe they were just very busy dealing with this today and had to put the sixth package on hold. But people are getting very anxious for this. We were being told last week that they had to wait until after the French election. The French election is over. It's been 3 days. We don't know where this package is. So far, it hasn't sped up the publication of this proposal. And even, I should caution, once that comes out, it's just a proposal. Then it has to go to the member states, and they need to approve it. And that's going to be a hard sell for Germany and Austria, and especially for Hungary.
Is it such a hard sell for Germany? We heard the economy minister, Dave, this Wednesday wondering aloud about whether to nationalize an oil refinery near Berlin that's run by a Russian company.
So what I'm hearing is that Germany is ready to approve some kind of oil embargo, but it could be a really light one. It could come with so many exceptions, so many caveats, such a long delayed phase-in that it ends up being meaningless. So I think we should parse those grand pronouncements that we've heard recently from German ministers with some salt, because it's going to get, the devil's going to be in the detail here. We are not going to get an overnight embargo against all Russian oil. That's not going to happen. What we're going to see is some kind of phased-in approach with all kinds of exceptions, and that's where Germany's okay is going to be really essential.
Dave Keating in Brussels, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank as well Jens Fischer for being with us from Berlin. Thierry Brosse, Anna Kreti, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.